welcome everybody to this really exciting panel discussion. Thank you, panelists, for joining us today. And we would try and focus and talk more about UX and CX and all the associated discussions around it. But before that, let me introduce the panelists to all of you. We have three panelists here. Panelists, as I call out your name, if you can just wave your hand so that everybody knows who you are. We have Bhavishya Garg. He's the head of UX department at MX Player. He's a UX UI designer, growth hacker, conversion optimizer, and innovation coach. He's worked with 45 plus brands all around the world. He's the author of critically acclaimed Amazon's Choice UX Notebook, founder of top UX designers from all around the world. It has a community of 130,000 designers. He's taken three startups from zero to 1 million plus dollars in revenue. He's also the ex-partner and head of growth and design for Coin DCX. He also gives guest lectures in almost all top design institutes in India and an alumni of Google Microsoft Student Network. He has a passion to disrupt how innovation and design is taught in young minds, and is hoping to hear a lot from him, Bhavishya. Welcome, Bhavishya, to this panel discussion today afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Neha, for inviting me. Thanks a lot, everyone. Glad to meet everyone.
Relations are emotional. Relations are about memories. It is about commitments. It's about loyalty, right? So how do you build those relations with digital systems? And with that, I would want to ask Bhavishya, because he's in, the head of MX Player, and MX Player has these many apps which have loyalty and relations. And people, when they think of MX, also have memories and emotions because of the content that MX has. So, Bhavishya, how do you, being the head of MX Player, take care of this relationship experience with your customers?
Right. So for MX Player specifically, our slogan is everytainment. It's entertainment for everyone for free, and it's one of the very first of its kind model in India. Most of the OTT platforms either have a monthly fee or an yearly fee, but MX Player is one of the only ones which is so big, bigger than Netflix and Amazon Prime right now in India in terms of users. It is serving to many different avenues of entertainment. And yes, I mean, put rightly, even Charles Darwin said that emotions are something that we are born with. It's not something that we acquire later in life, right? And just going on the model that Don Norman created for us, we mainly differentiate different behaviors into visceral, reflective, and basically just three sections: behavioral, reflective, and I'm sorry, visceral. And just dividing emotions or the behaviors of the users in these three core sectors, we are able to isolate if we are able to impact better in the visceral level of emotional design, or we are able to impact better on the behavioral form. And that's how we are able to gauge. And one of the most important things, one of the most crucial things that we have done to ensure that is to have a very close pulse on the data, very close pulse on users. So we created a lot of personas and created global repositories of those personas, so that we can everyone, not just the design team, but everyone in the organization can read those, can learn from those, and plan accordingly. Because we as a company, MX Player specifically, is extensively focused or obsessed about customers. Customer centricity is literally at the top of our values, and just creating right processes around the design, so that not even analytics team or product team or marketing team is aware about the personas that we are catering, or personas that we are launching certain campaigns for. And just making sure, even through COVID, we made sure that we do constant user research activities, constant usability testing, so that we know at all times what our customers need, what they expect, and what could we potentially offer them to entertain them.
Cool, wonderful. And so you spoke about these behavioral and visceral aspects of knowing your customers. And it's pertinent that you touch upon these, because if you do not understand the behavioral, visceral, auditory, or what could be the right solutioning may not come to you if you do not understand these aspects of your customers. But we often internally deal with a lot of multi faceted teams. There's a technology team, there's a business team, and there's a marketing team, each of them with their own agendas. How do you then, as heads of customer experience, user experience within your organizations, and this is open to all, which we can start with Bhavishya, how do you drive this cause of CX and UX internally? I know for sure it's a difficult cause to drive. Not everybody may agree to your viewpoint. Not everybody may walk with you in what decision and solutioning you're proposing. So how do you do that? What's the storytelling that you do and the magic that you do? We'll start with Bhavishya.
I think the magic starts with the hiring. For instance, in case of MX Player, everyone who is hired, we are looking for customer centricity, their obsession about customers and user experience within their profile. So everyone who comes on board, they're not just technically the best in their field, they are also obsessed about customers. So that creates a really good foundation for us from the very day one. Whether it's a product manager or it's a designer, they ask questions like, will users how would users respond to it, how can we test it, how do we make them best possible hypothesis, which key metrics are we tracking for this specific task. And then when everyone is not just aware about how to do a proper product design or how to do a customer centered design, they are also implementing it through the processes that everyone has created. So apart from hiring, the second most important thing according to me is setting the right process. And it's not just about documentation that will lie in your Google Drive and you'll never open it, but creating documents that are active enough that you are referring to them every week or every month, everyone is referring to them or collaborating them at a real time. And once you have a process or a repository of documents which helps you in your process, the last thing that remains is unlimited amount of testing. And I think unlimited amount of testing means in different configurations. For example, we are promoted, we are encouraged to work with the graphic team or marketing team or analytics team. You need to constantly test how you are able to work with different teams and what kind of output are you producing, and not just as a design team but as an individual. Maybe someone in my design team might be really good at product management and the other one might be really good at graphic design. So the latter one could help in marketing and the prior one could help in maybe the next possible features that we are planning, or coming up with any new ideas for the product. So that is how I think that's where I would decode the core of most good organizations lie within hiring process and then unlimited amount of experimentation with what fits perfectly for you.
Awesome. And Vijay, what about you? How would you tell us you go about, internally taking all the stakeholders along with you for the solutions that you propose?
This is a slightly different one, Neha. It all depends on, I think there are two or three different answers to it. One answer is at what design maturity level your organization is currently at. It all depends whether it's a founding organization, it's a startup, or it's a conglomerate, or this is like, funded by somebody, from overseas, what kind of a vision you have, right? So the design mature organizations certainly bring design on the top, and the designers as part of every marketing discussion, even product inception level. They are asked to visit the field, do the current auditing. That's one level, and it's a blessed. These are the blessed organizations, and these are the organizations where effectively, I'm just drawing a broader analysis from my last several years of working experience. The people at the top have global design experience. They themselves are connoisseurs, they buy things, and they are the people effectively in the age group of between 35 to 45, right? Then comes the other league of the organizations, which are inherited organizations, where there's a three generation of lineage kind of happening across. And most of these organizations who are there in the country, who have got a legacy of more than 30, 40 years, they at some point in India started as trader organizations, where they effectively imported stuff, and in the later stage they started imported importing the variations of these parts, and then they started assembling these parts in the country. But the innovation still never happened in the country. We always had these blueprint drawings coming to us, and in the later stage we also started molding and manufacturing this, but the innovation again belongs to those countries, right? So it all depends what cycle of journey you are. And I think our my humble advice is to have patience with organizations which are in this other world, where the third generation are kind of working through, because you need to be empathetic with them, because they haven't seen designers working. They don't know how much of investment actually goes through it. So it's a gradual, I would say, learning curve they go through that. And in your coffee book, I would say, coffee parlance circles, or the pantry circles, or in offsites, you gradually talk about certain success stories where design was at the center and it created some kind of a value creation. So it all depends on your design maturity, I think, cycle. I don't know if I've answered your question correctly, Neha.
So, what you're also saying, Vijay, then is, because I know a lot of audience may belong to organizations where design is not at the forefront, like you
Yeah,
said, the third part of it.
yeah,
Then it's about having a lot of patience and getting design in the forefront. So it becomes the onus and the responsibility of the design team to also keep ensuring at various stages that what difference can design make. Like
yeah.
in one of the earlier discussions, there was a very interesting statistics that one rating that grows on Yelp, the business grows by 29%.
Correct,
Right? I
correct.
thought it was an interesting statistics, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, I think the designer needs to show how a little more of reduction in bounce rate or increase in engagement has led to an overall conversion, and talk numbers, because I think a lot of designers do not or are not equipped to talk numbers.
Right.
So,
Can I comment on that point if I have
yes,
time? Yeah.
yes,
So I think you have hit upon a beautiful area trajectory, which is what we call as design management. Design apparently is the only institution and curriculum in the country which is not regulated. For engineers, you have got certification. For architect, you have got certification. For doctors, lawyers, you have got certification. The fundamental reason for that, all these fields, if you goof up, if there is a problem, there is a threat of a life. Somebody can lose a life. An architect goofs up or an engineer goofs up. So in our industry, fundamentally design is not defined. So you have got advertising people practicing design, you have got engineers practicing design, you have got UX practitioners, and you have product designers also practicing design, right? If an advertising person who was awarded 10 times at Cannes, their product fails, it's not that their license will get cancelled, because there is nothing called as a license in the industry, right? So designers fundamentally they don't know how to associate a certain innovation value to a business value, and you've hit it on the head. There is some regulation which is required, and in US particularly, because we look up to those countries time and again, our design systems come from there, right? And it's important that at some point of time there got to be some business person talking to a designer to figure out how do they actually calculate the value invested in design versus the output. There are two parts to it. One is the softer part, which Aditya mentioned, about the customer satisfaction value, which is the emotive value for a brand. Another is how much the person is now willing to spend today and maybe in 15 years down the line. Those things can be easily defined if a designer and a business person kind of comes together. But the fundamental problem is designers, they confuse themselves a lot between this artist, esoteric artist, hey, I need to get awarded. And that's a problem in the industry, right? This is my personal take.
no, I echo that thought.
Yeah, yeah,
And Aditya, you come from a very traditional brick and mortar business, right? In that business, how do you spearhead the design calls? Is it challenging with, I know that you have sprints defined, you have timelines, and you need to deliver on those timelines. And there are legacy systems that you have that you need to work with, which may or may not always allow you to change or envisage experiences the way you ought to. So, what would you have to comment on that?
Okay. I agree with what Vijay said. If First of all, before starting a project, I think so. It's very important to have a project or product strategy in place, and I think so. You should. Of course, there are challenges because the top management usually, expects certain things from the lower management, which is really not. Sometimes it is not in sync, and deliveries and expectations might change. So it is pretty much important before starting any project. Like Vijay said, whether it's a startup or a top MNC or a company like mine, you should be pretty clear of your goals. First of all, what you're trying to do. I would say you could answer this with three whys. You could say first why is what you're trying to do, and the goals. You get these goals and what you want to do in place, and people, the stakeholders, which should be ideally from the top management to the team members involved in the project, so that we are all on the same page, we all know what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. The second why would be, why are we doing this? Why are we coming out with the product solution? And be clear about it. And the third W is, who are we trying to do it for? So if you who, when I say who, it is specifically the target audience, the segment which we are trying to target, and trying to know their pain points, their user needs, and trying to associate their pain points with our solution. So if we are clear with all these three whys, I think so we would be in a very, very good position to initiate a project, and not have confusion or problems while executing it at a later stage. So I think so this should ideally help in getting things moving early ahead. So I think so that is what I would like to say about it.
Okay, great. Before we open
Hello.
the, yes,
Yeah.
Aditya, we can hear you. Um, I did hear that. I said great insights. Before we open the floor for questions, very quickly, one question across to all of you. Your closing remarks on what is great CX and how do you measure it? Very, very briefly. Bhavish, starting from you.
I think briefly how I would measure customer satisfaction is one of the easiest ways that I've found is the raving positive reviews. Fortunately, I've been in startups that have a lot of users, so we get to see that in public. Might not be true for slightly smaller startups, but just the positive sentiment in the market for your app does it for us.
Awesome. Vijay, what is great UX? How do you measure it?
3 points directly on that. One is people come to you for a purpose. Stay true to that purpose and don't deviate from that. That's one. Second is be available. Depending on where people want you to be. Like there could be chatbots, there could be physical presence. And the third is I call this the coriander philosophy of the country, which is the Dhaniya philosophy. People come to you for, let's say, buying vegetables, but they'll expect that bit extra of coriander and chilies. Always deliver that. That's it.
Sure. Aditya, your closing remark and what is great CX? How do you measure it?
Actually, there are means and ways to actually measure, customer satisfaction as well. There is something called testing as well, where you do a behavioral testing and attitudinal testing with the users as well. That is something where you do. There are ways where there is indirect data gathering method and direct data gathering method. So I think so. If you say direct data gathering method, if you would say that that would be behavioral and conducting a behavioral and an attitudinal test, and if you would say an indirect way of getting data from the customers would be through surveys or through reviews. That is the best possible way of doing it. Or you have a CSAT or something like that. So that would be an indirect way of getting the feedback from the users.
Awesome. All right. So, what we heard today, I think, was across what is customer experience to going down to the Bharat and the India and combining the United States of India and looking at the larger picture and a regional picture together and having the ability to be able to do that. and the ability to drive the cause internally in your organization, and some very interesting insights from our panelists today.